Hi, my name is Beth Drucker, and I am the co-facilitator for Go Green Illinois, along with my colleague Kim Stone, who is in Highland Park. And want to welcome people to our 72nd meeting of this organization. We've been growing since 2013, and we had 120 people register for this meeting, which might be a new high, as well as people representing 44 different communities. The awareness that local action is really, really important is certainly growing every day. And so we want to thank all of you for your willingness to be engaged and working in your own communities. We can make a difference. We are making a difference. And the issue today, which is one that clearly is very compelling for a lot of people, is the problem with plastics. So we're going to have a few announcements, and then we will start. So, all right, so the announcements: Go Green Illinois and Go Green Des Plaines for the first time shared a session at the Wild Things Conference, 2,500 attendees. It happens every other year. The focus is on habitat and conservation. We gave a talk that says why your town needs a sustainability group and how you can start one. If you know anyone who lives in another town and would be interested in learning how to start a group, I offer a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. So please send them our way. Every time a group starts, amazing things happen. So help us with that. The next meeting after today is the May 13 program. The focus is going to be first and foremost on reducing food waste in your community, but then also setting up food composting programs, municipal, schools, park district events. Liz Kunkle of Go Green Winnetka is going to be helping us schedule a tour of a local composting facility called Prairie Acres. That will be scheduled, and we'll get that out to you. We have Becky Brodsky. If you're in, we're giving Becky Brodsky a minute to talk about a very important climate education for Illinois bill. So Becky, if you could unmute yourself and step in right now, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So yes, I've been 7 Generations Ahead has been partnering with a couple other organizations to work on a climate education bill in Illinois, and that bill actually passed last August. So we are holding a fundraiser, Climate Education for Illinois and 7 Generations Ahead, on Thursday, April 24th from 7 to 9 p.m. at Sketchbook Brewery in Skokie. That is in support of the creation of an Illinois climate education hub that will basically support the enaction of this bill. So Subject to Climate is a nonprofit that has created these customized hubs for a number of other states around the country, is creating the hub for Illinois, and this will help teachers implement this new requirement. The hub will serve as a crucial resource for educators and provide scientifically rigorous, locally relevant, and equity-centered curriculum that is aligned with Illinois state standards. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to this fundraiser, and there's more information about the bill and more details about the fundraiser. So I hope that you guys can attend, and please, if anybody has any questions about the bill, about the hub, about the fundraiser, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to remind you that Election Day is coming up. Kim Stone is running for councilwoman. It is super, some of you may also be running. It's very important that we get great people elected, and sometimes it requires us to run for public office. So at very least, support those people, the good candidates willing to run. Think about running for public office next round yourself. Highland Park is planning an EV car show. You're welcome to send people to their show May 3rd. They are still looking for great cars to show. Now is the time to think about that. Now is the time to think about signing up for farmers market booths, and our spring and summer season is fast approaching. Think about co-partnering with other groups so that you can do more with less. They'll be very happy if you promote their events and send your folks to what they're doing. We also are trying to keep track of which towns have hired paid sustainability staff. Please put it in the chat if you would, if your town has a paid facility staff person. And with that, we are going to start our program. And so I would like to introduce Jacquelyn Casazza. She founded Go Green Glen, Ellyn, and she has been very, very active ever since. Someone is not on mute, please. Okay, Jacquelyn, so you now have the mic. I'm going to spotlight you, and I'd like you to give everybody a kind of an overview of why this program is important and who's going to be presenting.
Yeah, thanks so much, Beth. I'm really excited to be here talking trash with everyone. So in addition to my role as the president of Go Green Glen Ellyn, I'm also a member of the Speakers Bureau for Beyond Plastics. And the plastic waste and pollution problem is something that has captured my attention for years. Now, the title of the program today is The Problem with Plastics. We've made a material that can do just about anything and lasts forever. But with nearly half of the plastic we make today, we don't want it to last forever. We only want to use it for a few minutes, and then it becomes waste. And when you realize that just about every piece of plastic ever created is still on this earth, and that our production is expected to double by 2030, that's not just a problem. That's what I would call a wicked problem, something that is so complex and difficult to solve that there's not going to be simply one approach. Our speakers today are going to share more information about this multifaceted problem and the complementary actions being taken. So I, like many of you, I'm sure, have been working to reduce my individual plastic consumption by bringing reusables, evaluating different packaging options when I shop, and even switching to products that are not made from plastic. And I also work to recycle, right? So not only the things in my curbside bin, but finding homes for things like plastic bags and even these little teeny tiny bread tags. Yet despite this, I still see plastic pollution everywhere. And even when I don't see it, I know that microplastics are in the air that we breathe, in the water we drink, and in the food that we eat. It's in the bodies of my friends and of my children. And it seems that just about every week, I read a new article that illustrates just how pervasive this problem is. Some of you might have seen this, a study that came out last month that looked at the amount of microplastics in the human brain for individuals aged 40 to 50. And compared to 2016, the levels had increased by 50%, and the amount that was found in the brain was equivalent to the weight of a plastic spoon. So to put it another way, my brain then is probably 99.5% brain and 0.5% plastic. Microplastics are everywhere and simply unavoidable at this point. But one of the more concerning aspects of this is all the chemicals that's used to make plastics. And we know that many of these chemicals include carcinogens and endocrine disruptors that can leach into our food web and into our bodies. And while we're still learning, already we know that many of these chemicals have been linked to health issues like immunity, reproductive, developmental, and neurological dysfunction. And one example of this is PFAS, which is found in a number of household products and clothing. But now PFAS is being found in places it doesn't belong, like our drinking water, our soil, and our food. And we'll hear more about this today from Fawkes, Char from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And while reducing our plastic consumption as individuals and working to recycle certain plastics is the right thing to do, it's simply not going to solve this problem. In fact, another 2 tons of plastic entered the ocean in the time it took me to speak this sentence. If anyone's been to the Blue Paradox exhibit at MSI, you'll have seen that slide. We simply cannot recycle our way out of this problem. And Alexis Goldsmith from Beyond Plastics is going to share more information about why recycling isn't the answer when it comes to plastics. Plastic is even replacing natural areas in our communities. Our parks and playgrounds are being increasingly designed with plastic turf to replace natural materials. And while turf installation is often touted as being easier to maintain, it brings with it a host of health and environmental concerns that need to be seriously thought through before adding this to a community where it will persist for 7 to 10 years and then forever in the landfill. Patricia Wood from the Grassroots Environmental Education will share more about plastic turf. We've already seen the tremendous devastation brought about by plastic waste in our environment, and we are learning more and more about the potential health impacts this material has on our bodies. but the onus should also to figure this out. In fact, once I accepted that no amount of my own individual actions on plastic would solve this problem, I actually breathed a small sigh of relief. To tackle this wicked problem, one thing that we really need are larger scale policy changes and legislation. So we're going to hear about policy from Bernadette Knight and Joel Freeman, who will share how plastic bag bans have been implemented in their communities. And we will also hear from Liz Kunkle, who will provide an update on some exciting legislation pending in Illinois that will address several types of single-use plastic waste and how you can get involved. So much plastic in our lives can feel overwhelming, but the good news is that represents countless opportunities for us to make change. So I'm now going to turn it back over to Beth, who will introduce the next speaker.
Okay, thank you so much. That was such a great overview, Jacquelyn. Really, really appreciate that. So we're going to keep moving quickly. I'd like to hand the mic over to Fawkes Char, who is joining us from Minnesota, where she is, where they are the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's PFAS coordinator. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be here with everybody today. Like Beth said, my name is Fawkes Char. I'm going to take a minute to pull up some slides. You're all going to see yourselves. Oh, I'm mostly seeing myself. Hopefully this is working.
It's perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent. I'm really glad we practiced.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks for inviting me to be here today. I am from the Twin Cities, Minnesota, born and raised, lived away for a while, moved back. I'm actually currently in Raleigh, North Carolina at a conference. So I'm really happy to be able to step out and present to this group. I'm going to talk a little about PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and the intersection of what we know about PFAS and plastics. So like I said, we'll talk about PFAS, otherwise known as forever chemicals, why they're an issue, talk about human health and environmental impacts. Beth did mention that it's worth trying to keep things a little bit light. So I will do my best not to make this sound doom and gloomy here. Try to put as positive a spin on things as I can. Focus a little bit more on certain types of PFAS and how they are or not plastics, and then some action-based items that you may be able to take back to you in your family or in your community about PFAS. So I don't like to make assumptions that everybody in all of my audiences knows what I'm talking about, right? So I'll start with the basics. And if you already know this, just stop listening to me for a couple slides. So PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances or forever chemicals. It's a mouthful, but really what it is you see this little fella here. This is a PFOS, which is one type of PFAS. These are carbon fluorine bonds is what characterizes a PFAS, and there are different definitions for what a PFAS may be, depending on who you ask, which has presented a bit of a challenge for us in the policy and research space. But in Minnesota, for example, we define PFAS to be any compound that has at least one fully fluorinated carbon atom. So you can see here in this PFOS, we've got all these carbon atoms and what's called this carbon backbone, and then all these little green fluorines here. There are, again, depending on which definition you think about, between 14,000 and probably 7 to 10 million different individual PFAS compounds. They're very prolific and used broadly because they're very useful for a variety of reasons. They repel water, they repel oil, they help lubricate things, they protect things. So these are chemicals that rightfully in some ways have been used to help improve life through chemistry, I think, as they say or have said. But that's part of the reason we're talking about this problem here today. So here's our fancy slide that we share. The biggest issues with PFAS, small amounts of PFAS can be harmful to people. In particular, we're talking very, very small amounts, parts per quadrillion, very small. PFAS are what we call bioaccumulative, or they can build up in humans and fish and other wild creatures over time. Kind of similar to mercury, although different, we're realizing. And PFAS are intended to be durable and indestructible. And so it turns out that when you produce, use, and then try to throw away things that are intended not to break down, as plastics are, which Jacquelyn referenced, it's hard to get them back out of the waste stream once they're in there. So this is a fancy slide video. There's no sound associated with this, so you're not missing anything, but this is just an example of how PFAS are manufactured and then how they move through both the human built environment and, of course, built environment for humans being part of our greater ecosystem here on Earth. But PFAS are manufactured. It started out that way, at least, and they would move through the environment through industrial waste sites, through wastewater treatment, both industrial and municipal wastewater treatment, in many ways through the products that people use, food we consume, but back in landfills that are not just closed old industrial sites, but current landfills that send their leachate to water treatment plants. And in any case, it ends up kind of everywhere. It ends up in soil and groundwater in some cases. And then we, in Minnesota, for example, a lot of our folks drink water out of private wells or even city municipal wells. And so in cases where groundwater has been contaminated, you can see that PFAS, those chemicals are getting pulled up into the groundwater. More research is being conducted, but you'll likely maybe have heard of actions going on in Maine around forever chemicals and PFAS in biosolids, for example, and land applications that are then taken up by crops and livestock. So it's really a big mess. This is why I was trying to say I'll try to do the best I can. There are some headway. We're making headway on reducing and trying to break this cycle. I'll talk a little bit about that later. Just as an example, in Minnesota, we have a little company that you may have heard of. It's called 3M. I was trying to remember. It's the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company, Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining. I can't remember what the second two, which order those are in it. Anyway, kind of in the early 2000s, that company said, hey, we're starting to detect this in some of our wells around our production sites. So the state of Minnesota looked at some other wells outside of those sites and drinking water wells and started finding these PFOA and PFOS compounds. From there, it's just kind of turned into a huge effort to try to find PFAS and then trying to understand how those compounds are moving through, like I said, both the built and natural environment. Once we started realizing PFAS were an issue, both the Minnesota Department of Health and the US EPA and many other state health departments have looked at the health impacts and the toxicity of PFAS chemicals. Something you'll hear a lot is that, well, we don't know, right? I had mentioned there's somewhere between 14,000 and 7 to 10 million PFAS. We have drinking water standards now for 6 of those. So the scale of the problem is immense. But for those few PFAS chemicals that we do have information about, there's really strong evidence that they can cause or at least correlated with immune suppression in humans, developmental effects, and potential reproductive effects. And people are exposed in all kinds of different ways. There's a lot of focus on drinking water because it's one thing that humanity holds sacred, right? We all need to drink water. It's something every single human person needs to continue to exist. So it can be a huge focus, but drinking water isn't necessarily the only, or in some cases, not even the largest source of exposure. In Minnesota, for example, we're really into fishing by and large. So fish consumption is a big deal, particularly for indigenous communities and some migrant communities. Other food consumption, we've got lots of agriculture, similar to Illinois, breast milk and formula, lots of research starting to go in that direction. Air, dust inhalation, you get the picture. as with anything, any other compound, you can be exposed in many different ways. And which PFAS exactly you're exposed to depends on how exactly you're exposed. So there are also, of course, environmental impacts to PFAS. I would say that we have a more limited understanding of what's going on in the environment, partly because the ecosystem as a whole is really hard to study. I have a background in ecology, and it's really easy to pull, kind of like in toxicology, easy to pull one part of the system out. And we can look at the toxicity of PFOS, so one PFAS compound on Daphnia, for example, in freshwater, which Daphnia are these, I'm smaller than this, very small little critters that swim around, and they're often used as a way to see how healthy a water body is, for example. So it's easy to see like, oh, well, if we look at this one single species and maybe even one or two individuals to see how it looks, but blowing that up on a state country scale is obviously really challenging. And for other, maybe perhaps obvious reasons, the toxicity of PFAS in humans has really taken front stage, just because we know that there are human impacts of these compounds. So our understanding is, excuse me, increasing, but still limited. Fate and transport is just a fancy way of identifying what happens to PFAS in the environment. So we call them forever chemicals. We say they don't break down, but in many cases, PFAS actually can break down. They just break down into other PFAS chemicals, and then they move around. Unlike many other toxicants or pollutants in the environment, for example, like heavy metals will settle out. They tend not to move very much, but because PFAS are water phobic, they move a lot, which makes it really challenging. And then we also have limited understandings, like I said, in non-human creatures and plant uptake, especially in wild settings. And then if or how PFAS accumulate in wild food webs, not necessarily human food or crops intended for human consumption, because those are getting some attention too. But this little deer friend here looks like they're maybe eating a mountain ash or something near a mountain ash. We just don't have a very good understanding yet of what that looks like. But we do know that PFAS are really all over the place. So there's a lot more to learn about the actual environmental impacts of these compounds. So PFAS and plastics specifically, this is what they call a graphical abstract, which is a newer, to me at least, thing that folks who publish peer-reviewed literature has to do. But this, and I apologize if this is really small on a phone screen, the idea here is that there's research that's happening on the interaction of PFAS and microplastics. And instead of making my own slide about it, I just use this image and cited it. But basically, PFAS tend to attach themselves to microplastics. And so you have PFAS moving around in the environment, and then you have microplastics and nanoplastics moving around in the environment. And it turns out sometimes these things are correlated with each other. PFAS can, they call it sorbing, can attach itself to those microplastics, and so they kind of move around together. In some cases, microplastics go through biofilms, which is just like when you see an old plastic and it's just kind of slimy and it's got stuff on it. It's a biofilm. PFAS tend to absorb or attach to those biofilms. So we talk about plastics moving around in the environment. There was recent research in Daphnia. So that little tiny species, this little blurb right in the middle here is the Daphnia. That's showing that there might actually be a condition where the toxicity of PFAS and microplastics together is more or additive than they should be, theoretically, if you were to add them together. So a lot of research there. I threw in the fluorinated high-density polyethylene. Again, it's a big mouthful. There's a lot of chemistry going on. I took chemistry a long time ago, and so I've been a little behind myself catching up since I took this position. But but HDPE is a plastic that's used. It's kind of that fluorinated stuff. It's thick plastic. It's used, for example, for pesticides or household cleaners. So if you get those bottles that are really thick, they're protective because they don't want things leaking or spilling. But it turns out that those containers are often fluorinated, both during production and when they're filled with other products. And so those PFAS that are in those fluorinated products tend to move away. I have 1 minute. Fluoropolymers. I'm going to skip a little bit. It's a big word, but basically fluoropolymers are fluorinated plastics. That includes PTFE, which is polytetrafluoroethylene, or Teflon. Lots of conversations about that, and I'm so sorry that I'm out of time maybe to talk about it. But this is a big deal of consternation right now. What you can do, reduce your own exposure when you can. Obviously, we can't all individually get ourselves out of this problem, which Jacquelyn also said. Help inform your friends and family. And I can share the slide deck too, so that y'all can look at this. Support ordinances and state legislation with product prohibitions. We have a Mars law in Minnesota. It's my understanding that the Illinois House Bill 1295, which would have been, I think they introduced the end of January, and I just Googled this because I was curious, so do not quote me. I'm not the expert on Illinois state law making. But that bill looks a lot like a Mars law, and I can talk more about that. Mars law is a prohibition of intentionally added PFAS in several consumer product categories that went into effect. A Mars law specifically on January 1st of this year. We have some other prohibitions that have gone into effect in prior years. And by 2032, the state of Minnesota will have prohibited all PFAS intentionally added to all products unless they are currently unavoidable. This is last informational slide that I have. The economic case for prevention. This came from a report that was paid for by the state's Environmental Natural Resources Trust Fund, which is used to support all kinds of research. But some math and real world examples showed that the cost to buy PFAS, $50 to $1,000 per pound, to actually remove and destroy that PFAS from the environment once it has been used, is $2.7 to $18 million per pound. So it's really much more cost effective to just not use it in the first place, because those costs are being passed on to us. So I say us as in like me as a human person that lives in the world and not as a state employee, I guess. But anyway, happy to take questions now. I can't see anybody on Zoom, and I do have to
so
off, but
thank
yeah,
you so much. That last slide was so sobering. The cost of removing this product that we kind of thought was innocuous up until not long ago
yes,
is really sobering. Clearly, we've got to be changing regulations fast. Kim Stone is going to be able to read some of the questions from the chat. Kim, are you available to do it?
I am, but I don't see any questions in the chat at this point. I do want to say though, thank you, Fawkes, for the state of Minnesota has been a leader on a lot of toxin issues. I know that we banned coal tar sealants in several municipalities in Illinois, many of whom are represented on the call, in part following the example set by Minnesota. We haven't been able to ban it statewide, but at least some municipalities have banned the sale of coal tar sealants. Okay, someone has asked, is it possible to make plastic petroleum-based products without PFAS?
I maybe shouldn't answer this as the expert. I would say yes. I don't know if the plastics industry would also say yes, if I'm being really truthful. But there are other plastics that are made at least without added PFAS. So I would say probably.
Okay, thank you. So Kim, you keep scanning the chat. We had a program on water quality 2 months ago, and we looked into filters on washing machines. Again, this isn't the way to solve the problem because, you know, filtering a couple washing machines is not going to solve it. However, for those of us that do want to help, that is certainly an option. I didn't realize till recently that all of our synthetic clothing is leaching plastic materials into water every time we wash and dry them. So I put an old school nylon stocking at the end of my tube. It is not going to filter out the tiny nano bits of plastic, but it might filter out some. So that was something I just did, cost nothing, and it makes me feel a little bit better. So are you telling us that every time we buy waterproof clothing or re-waterproof the clothing that we own, we are actually adding PFAS into the system?
Potentially. There are some companies that have already moved away from using PFAS in their waterproofing.
Okay, so we should be on the lookout for that.
Mhm.
I also heard, oh, go ahead, Kim.
Can PFAS be filtered out of water supply? And is this something that municipalities can afford?
Yeah, great questions. There are methods of removing PFAS from drinking water. Granular activated carbon is one way that water systems in Minnesota have been dealing with it. You can also use reverse osmosis systems, and both of those can be done at scale at large drinking water plants that are sending water out to communities. They also have what are called point of entry systems, and that's when you have an RO filter, for example, on the water coming into your house. So the state of Minnesota installs granulated activated carbon and sometimes RO systems.
Okay, well, as usual, we could be peppering you with questions for the next 30 minutes. If you can stick around, that's great. You may have to sign off. But we're going to move on to our next speaker. This is Alexis Goldsmith. She's with Beyond Plastics. She is working on at least a national level with the plastic issues. And so, Alexis, would you please? I'm trying to find where you are so I can.
I'm here.
Hit you. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so could you please share your slides? And we're going to get to the full view.
While she's getting set up, there's a witness slip that people can fill out for a PFAS bill in the state of Illinois, and there's a link in the chat that Jacquelyn has put in there.
Okay, great. And with that, we are on time. Fawkes, thank you so much for all your work in Minnesota. You guys are leaders, and now we have to make sure Illinois is leading and every other state. So with that, we have Alexis. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm the organizing director at Beyond Plastics. We are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to ending plastic pollution. And we do that by building grassroots capacity and passing laws to reduce the use and production of plastics. And I've been invited here to talk today about plastics recycling and kind of explain what the situation is with plastic recycling in the US. So first of all, the US plastic recycling rate is currently less than 6%. I think most people on this call already know that, but maybe we don't always know why the rate is so low, or we often hear that the industry is investing money and resources into improving recycling. The government is funding new recycling efforts, but plastics recycling is largely a myth. And I have to say, recycling for other materials, paper, glass, aluminum, works very well. Aluminum can be recycled almost infinitely, but plastics present unique challenges. So here are some of the overall issues with plastics recycling and why the rate is less than 6%. So first of all, it's mixed materials. So there are many different types of plastic resins. If you look at a plastic bottle or, a plastic packaging, it'll have that chasing arrow symbol with a number in it. So those are the different resin types. And number 7 is everything else. So it can be, there are more than 7 resin types, and sometimes a piece of packaging has more than one resin type, or it's mixed with other materials you get a thin aluminum with plastic lining, or it might be mixed with paper in the same packaging. So it's very difficult to separate plastic when it's mixed in with other materials. Second thing is there are 16,000 known chemicals used in the production of plastic. And most of these have not been tested for safety, but a lot of them have been studied and found to be carcinogenic, endocrine disrupting, bioaccumulating, and otherwise toxic to human health and the environment. So when those get recycled, they wind up in the recycled products, and there's really no disclosure required so that you as the consumer know what kind of chemicals are in that plastic. Also, contamination is a big issue. So contamination with food, contamination with other materials that makes the plastic unrecyclable. And then second to all these other issues is the fact that when plastic is recycled, it degrades. So even under the best conditions, let's say in a state with a bottle bill, where the number ones and number twos, which are the most recycled types of plastic, are source separated, they're clean, and they're able to go to a recycling facility. Even when those plastics are recycled, it degrades in quality. So a Coke bottle is not recycled into a new Coke bottle unless additional plastic can be added to it. And that's the issue is that with recycled plastic, you always have to have virgin plastic added to it, new plastic added to it. So plastic recycling is technically infeasible at scale at the rate that we are producing plastic, which is more than 400 million metric tons globally, and it's economically infeasible. It's very expensive to collect, sort, and recycle all this plastic, especially when fossil fuel subsidies make new plastics very, very cheap compared to recycled plastic. So why go with this degraded product that might be contaminated when you can just get new plastic? So all plastic is made from fossil fuels and chemicals. A lot of our plastic packaging is made from fracked gas. So a lot of us have single stream recycling. I live in a state with a bottle bill, so I redeem all my deposit containers, which, like I said, is usually the number one and number two bottles, but everything else just goes into the curbside bin. And the result of that is that recycling facilities are inundated with worthless plastic waste that can't be separated, that's contaminated, and it can't be recycled. And even if it could be, there's probably no end market from it. So the recycling facilities do sort out the ones and twos, the ones that are valuable. In some communities, they sort out the number 5, but everything else they have to pay to get rid of, either through landfilling, and you don't have incineration in Illinois, but maybe it's exported as well. So recycling plastic is very toxic. As I mentioned, plastic contains 16,000 toxic chemicals. Plastic can also absorb chemicals. So think about, I like the example of a glyphosate bottle. Glyphosate is the toxic chemical that's in Roundup, the herbicide. Plastic can absorb those toxic chemicals. It's not inert. Plastic can also absorb harmful bacteria that can then travel around and catch a ride on the plastic. And it contributes to things like algae blooms. So it can absorb those toxic chemicals, and then when it gets in the recycling stream, let's say a glyphosate bottle is recycled into some other type of packaging, you don't know what toxic chemicals are in that recycled plastic. And then the recycling process itself can create new toxic chemicals because it uses high heat to melt and extrude the plastic. So chemical reactions can create new toxic chemicals. So that's 3 ways that recycled plastic is toxic. There was a Greenpeace report on this in 2024 called Forever Toxic: The Science on Health Threats from Plastic Recycling. And I just urge you to take a look at this report. It describes in detail why recycled plastic is toxic. And then another issue with mechanical recycling is that it is a major point source of microplastic pollution. So this came out in spring of 2023. There was a study of a mechanical recycling facility in the UK that found the facility was releasing 3 million pounds of microplastics from recycling every year with filtration. So this is an emerging issue. There's more research being done on this, but basically we can expect microplastics anywhere that plastic is handled and processed. California is currently suing Exxon, one of the biggest plastic producers in the world, for greenwashing recycling. I urge everyone to read the California lawsuit, which is linked here in my slides, and I'm happy to share my slides. But basically, the lawsuit alleges that ExxonMobil has known since about the 80s that recycling plastic would not work. And not only did they know that, they continued to push recycling as a solution for plastic waste to give consumers the feeling that it's okay to buy plastic as long as you recycle it. And that way they could continue to produce more and more plastic from fossil fuels. And in that complaint, you can read that 80% of Exxon's projected growth is from plastics and petrochemicals. So the very same producers that push recycling as a solution know that it's not. And also they're trying to distract the public and lawmakers from their fault in the problem. So a lot of emphasis is placed on personal responsibility, on making better choices, recycling better, collecting plastic waste, and just managing plastic waste better. Because producers like Exxon and other big oil and gas companies want to distract from the fact that they're producing millions and millions of tons of plastic every year from fossil fuels. And they don't want lawmakers to pass legislation that would actually restrict the production and use of plastic, even though the vast majority of the public supports such policies. So that was mechanical recycling, and I'd like to just mention chemical recycling really quick. So chemical recycling is like recycling 2.0. Exxon and other big companies are claiming that they can use these chemical recycling technologies to fix recycling and actually make plastic to plastic infinitely. This is another big scam. The main result of chemical recycling is another distraction from reducing the production and use of plastic. Chemical recycling is an umbrella term for a lot of different technologies like pyrolysis, gasification, methanolysis, solvolysis, all these chemical sounding terms that are mainly just turning plastic into fuel to be burned. And it's very ineffective, it's very polluting, it's highly expensive, and like I said, it's a distraction for the chemical companies to say to lawmakers, hey, don't restrict the use of plastic. Don't pass a bill to restrict the use of plastic. We can recycle it. I know mechanical recycling hasn't worked, but we have this new technology called chemical recycling that's going to work, and it's all smoke and mirrors. Another danger of plastic recycling is stockpiling of plastics. So this is a photo from Richmond, Indiana. Last year, there was a huge fire at a warehouse that had just stockpiled plastics, ostensibly to be recycled, but it was just sitting there. And because plastics are made from oil and gas, they burn very, very well, and they burn really hot. And this fire evacuated the entire town, and they could not put it out for several days. There is a list on the last beach cleanup of fires at plastic recycling facilities. This is extremely common. And in fact, you may have a warehouse near you that is stockpiling plastic waste because it can't be recycled. So like I said, the petrochemical industry uses recycling as a distraction from the real problem, which is producing plastics from fossil fuels. And they want to continue to produce as much plastic as possible because it is a major part of their growth, their profits. They're moving away from fossil fuels as a fuel, which is a good thing, but they're moving more towards plastic and petrochemicals, which has immense impacts on the climate, immense impacts on environmental justice communities. Plastic warms the planet 4 times more than the global aviation industry, and these facilities are almost always sited in low-income communities and communities of color, which is part of this larger global social and environmental justice issue where those who contribute the least to climate change suffer the most from its impacts. And they're always the communities of color, the low-income communities, like I said. We can't recycle our way out of this problem. We need to pass laws that restrict the production and use of plastic. So that's plastic recycling in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions, and there's my email. I would love for you to get in touch.
Wow, that was amazing. Alexis, thank you so much. You can stop sharing your slides. Wow. Okay. So a lot of us know this, but to get this kind of presentation is such a good reminder of how important this is. As you're thinking, if there's anyone who you know that is not on this meeting, please know that we are recording it and we'll be posting it to the Go Green Illinois YouTube channel by tomorrow. So please then go there, share the link with anyone you know that thinks, would like to know more about this. So Kim Stone, do we have some questions for Alexis?
The main question is the lining of cartons and cups, like paper cups and milk cartons, those sorts of things. Those are all lined with plastics. I don't know if there's any more to say about it. They are being recycled in our area. Are they really being recycled? I think they actually are. There's a company in Lake County that has technology to separate out some of those mixed products, but I don't know if you have more to say on that.
The only thing I would say is recycling is very localized. So if a company sells a product nationwide, but it can only be recycled in a few communities, then it's not really recyclable except in those few communities, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I want to mention is that all of our groups have the capacity to teach our communities about sustainable celebrations. Reducing single-use plastic at the parties in our towns is really, really important. I went to an event recently and was amazed that finally I was being offered 3 ounces of wine in not a recyclable or a throw-out plastic glass. The little recyclable plastic glasses, not so recyclable, not so compostable, not easily. These are infinitely usable, and we bought 40 of these to share with anybody willing to not serve their guests in plastic glasses. So that's something that every group could do. They're available through Amazon or other sources I know, and they're not expensive.
And most places will give you a real cup when you go, if you're getting a coffee or something somewhere, but you usually have to ask for it. So the other question from Mary is it better still to put something in your recycle bin than to throw it away if it's one of the things that is listed as being recyclable?
I think this comes down to a personal choice, how you feel about it personally. It does make money for your local recycling facility, especially if it's a number 1 and number 2. So that's a consideration. Whereas they have to pay to landfill all the other things. It's likely not going to be recycled into a product of equal or lesser value. It'll probably be downcycled into like a textile or a rug. So I go back and forth on this, but you have to make that decision for yourself.
Thanks. I mean, I think the main thing is you got to reduce first. Refuse plastic, reduce the plastic, try and avoid the plastic altogether, and then make your decision as to what to do with what you still can't avoid. How thorough is the testing of food grade plastics and leaching from them, especially with acidic content?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
I would say it's been researched, but there's really no requirements. So I would not microwave anything in plastic, for example. We know there's research out there that plastic migrates better into fatty foods. So like, and especially with mechanical, like agitation. So like if you put something like a salad dressing or something in a plastic bottle and you shake it, the mechanical agitation and the oil in the salad dressing will cause more microplastics to leach. So acidic foods, oily foods, and hot foods leach more, as that's what the research is showing us, but it's not regulated.
So if you need to put something in plastic, maybe a sandwich is better than a fatty soup or something like that, or an acidic soup.
Sure. And then always take it out to reheat it, put it in a bowl before you put it in the microwave.
Okay, I think that's the questions, Beth.
Okay, that's great. We are on time. Alexis, thank you for the work you're doing. We are going to be trying to bring this into our communities and amplify what you're trying to do on a national level. So thank you very, very much. Next, we're going to talk about plastic grass. It's called artificial turf. It is billed as a sustainable water-saving solution. And we've tracked down Patricia Wood, who is going to tell us why that is not so. So with that, and all of us are in communities that might be considering plastic turf and may have already installed it. So this is something that if you put this on the radar screen of your town and your park district and your school district now, before they start considering it, that's when it's most effective. So you're not going to think about artificial turf. Let us put you in touch with someone who can show you the downside to a solution that is going to be pitched by the seller as a really great solution for the community. So with that, I'm going to let Patricia Wood start her presentation. Thank you, Patricia. She is coming to us from Long Island and Westchester County, New York.
Yes, so thank you so much for having me. I did want to make a quick comment about the PFAS in water and how you can remove it. I know that here on Long Island, we have a huge problem with PFAS in our water supply because we sit on top of our aquifers, which is our sole source of drinking water. And in Columbia, at Columbia University and Rutgers, they did a great study on PFAS and, well, actually microplastics in drinking water. And they found that the RO systems themselves were actually shedding plastics into the finished water. They actually were removing PFAS, but the filters on the RO systems are all plastic. And so the water is going through at a very high velocity. And so what happens is that they actually are shedding microplastics. So, you know, we have a lot of people here on Long Island saying, what's worse, PFAS or plastics? So, you know, there are no good answers in some places for that problem. So, okay. So we are Grassroots Environmental Education is a environmental health nonprofit. We've been around for a while. We have a mission to educate the public about the links between common environmental exposures and human health. And we feel like we're juggling all the time and doing triage, right? Because that's the nature of environmental health and environmental toxins. So I just want to say that when we're talking about artificial turf, we are actually dealing with the two major sources of micro and nanoplastic contamination in our environment, which is tires and plastic fibers. Okay, so here you see a artificial turf field being installed actually in our community in Port Washington, New York. It's made from many different components, including a plastic backing, which the blades are actually attached to. And those are typically made from polyethylene, polypropylene, and nylon. And then a liquid, and this is maybe new to some people, but a liquid backing or coating is actually then used on that surface. And it is made from urethane, which secures the grass blades and provides durability. PFAS is typically used to facilitate the manufacturing process as well as to improve the durability and UV protection of the plastic grass strands. Now, I heard from some friend of mine in Albany who is with the ACC, the American Chemistry Council, who said we really can't make plastic, most types of plastic, without using PFAS in the manufacturing process to facilitate the removal of the plastic item from the molds or the plastic not getting stuck in the extrusion. Okay, now here's actually little pieces of plastic grass and then the infill material. And although there are many different types of infill material now, the tire crumb rubber infill is the most common choice for cushioning materials in artificial turf. If you're a sports fan or enthusiast and you see our NFL players on those fields, you just see that black plastic, going up in, in these big, plumes really, when they're either diving or sliding on it. Approximately a quarter or 24% of every single tire that is manufactured is plastic polymer. That's a quarter of every single tire. And it is cost effective, obviously, because it's a waste product, right? And we're trying to use it as part of the RCRA law. And it absorbs impact. And this actually has to do with the GMAX rating, which is a little off topic, but it's the maximum impact that the surface will absorb. And so players are really pushing. When I talk about players, I'm talking about, professional players. They're really pushing to play on natural grass. And one of the problems is this GMAX rating, because the GMAX rating goes down as the material is compressed. So it makes players more vulnerable to concussions and serious injuries, et cetera, et cetera. The international men's soccer teams, they refuse to play on artificial turf. And so there are good reasons for that. Okay, so here's that plume of the black infill material from the tire crumb rubber here, but it also has a lot of dust and tiny little micro and nanoplastics coming out of that. They're being inhaled by athletes at every practice and at every game. We're talking about kids who are playing for hours and hours and hours every week and every weekend during certain sports seasons. So an artificial turf field is the perfect place to accelerate the breakdown of plastic, which is accomplished primarily with UV radiation, right? This is a field that has no trees on it, no shade on it, and it is a perfect place to accelerate this breakdown. There are also other ways that you accomplish the breakdown of plastic is field use and other elements, weather elements. Micro and nanoplastics are shed into the surrounding environment. They're contaminating soil, air, and water sources. And an average 80,000 square foot field contains 40,000 pounds of plastic carpeting and 400,000 pounds of infill material. So depending on the age, the type of use, and the maintenance of the field, annual plastic fiber loss on a single field has been estimated at 5 to 10% annually. In 2020, this is a really interesting thing that we looked at recently. In 2020, the city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada, identified relevant sources of plastic pollution in their city. And they calculated emissions for each source by multiplying activity data by emission factors for each source, and summed up the emissions to obtain the total annual emissions of plastic pollution generated. Litter was the largest source overall of plastics, and artificial turf was the largest source of microplastic contamination. So this is a deteriorating field in Brooklyn, New York, and this is what happens when you walk on that field. So you can see that the bottom of the shoe is covered with plastic fibers, and then this handful of plastic fibers was taken on the curb outside the park on this city street. And these are plastic fibers that are shedding off that field. And then the last picture is just fibers on the coat. Now, what's really interesting is that these are pictures of a parent's shoes and parent's coat, not the kids who are actually playing on the field. And this field is about 15 years old, which should have been replaced. And it is in the condition it's in this condition right now. As I speak, it is being used. So we're concerned about many of these fields being built on school grounds, which are in the middle of neighborhoods or in city parks with surrounding apartment buildings. And they're all being impacted by these plastic particles in the air and on the sidewalks in the yards, which they track inside their homes, et cetera, and in their carpeting. Fields in more remote areas are contaminating water supplies and sensitive ecosystems, and there's a lot of science on this. We can just look at, the ocean, the contribution of artificial turf fields to the ocean plastics. It's that we know are just enormous. So that's kind of where we are on that. Now, I'm going to repeat a little bit about what Alexis said, but at the end of its life, which is somewhere between 7 and 10 years, artificial or synthetic turf complex composition makes it really difficult and really costly to recycle. And we know in some cases, and as Alexis had mentioned that they're still up in the air as to whether these fields can be recycled. There are 3 options, though, at the moment. Cut it up like they've done here, roll it up like they've done here, and store it on vacant land or even farms where they actually pay the landowners some fee to have those fields stored there. And then you can repair it and reuse it. There are several companies that actually take these huge football fields, some of which are not really worn very much, and they repair it, cut it up, and reuse it for smaller projects, which is basically their way of recycling it. And the third option, which is known as advanced recycling, requires relatively new and really non-transparent industrial processes. We have tried and tried and tried to see what they are actually doing inside these plants that say that they are recycling them and producing new plastic. But they create large amounts of toxic waste. They add to our climate change crisis with their emissions. They have huge energy consumption, and they create more areas where people will be affected, adding to the scourge of growing environmental justice communities. Plastics are risky to recycle, as their chemicals wind up in the end product in much greater numbers than in virgin plastic, and they also create micro and nanoplastics, which Alexis also spoke about. So that's really the state and here the fate of artificial turf. It is unfortunately growing, a growing commodity. More and more schools are raising funds to put in these $1 million+ fields, thinking that they are now, giving their kids, their student athletes, a state-of-the-art surface to play on.
Patty,
of course we know
Patty, I'm so sorry. You're going to need to wrap up, okay?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay, awesome. Patty, that was so great. And this is an issue that each and every one of us can make a difference of in our communities. I know for a fact we've already gotten these installed in many of our communities, and more requests are going to get made. So Patty, thank you for all the work that you're doing. People can find your website at tell me the name of your website.
It's grassrootsinfo.org.
Okay, and then put that in the chat, please, so we can keep it.
Yeah.
When I post this to the YouTube channel, I will be adding the time stamp of when each of these presentations will start. And if you need someone from your school district or park district or village to watch this segment about plastic grass, it'll be easy to say start at minute 27 or whatever, okay? Thank you so much. We're gonna move on because right now we are going to talk, Kim Stone is gonna show a video from Bernadette Knight, Go Green Northbrook, and Evanston were two communities that I know of that have managed to put in bag restriction laws and ordinances. Bernadette Knight could not be with us, but she's given us a 5-minute video. It's really good. Kim Stone is going to play it for us. So if people in your town say, why don't we just ban bags? We are going to hear from both Northbrook and Evanston about how hard it is, how long it takes, but that ultimately you can do that. So Kim, where are we now with the video?
I am going to share the video right now.
Perfect. Thank you. And Evanston, Joel Freeman is up next.
My name is Bernadette Knight. I'm from Go Green Northbrook, and this is a short primer on Northbrook's single-use bag fee. This first slide is an overview of the timeline of the years before the bag fee was implemented in January 24. I'll give you some more detail as we go through, but I won't be covering the anticipated benefits of reducing the use of single-use anything, as we don't have time today. We were fortunate in Northbrook to have a proactive and supportive group of trustees who adopted a climate action plan in 2021. The plan has 9 categories and over 100 proposed actions. Section 4 of the plan relates to waste management. First item in the waste management section, 1.1, relates to single-use products, which the climate action plan proposed should be phased out by 2026. In September 21, the village trustees adopted a priority goal of reducing single-use bags and asked the Sustainability Commission to make recommendations. Throughout 2022, the Sustainability Commission and Sustainability Coordinator, Tessa, went to work on the project, conducting surveys and outreach, finding, debating options, and developing a recommended bag fee structure for the trustees. Public opinion was and is important. Very few businesses responded to the proposal, but many residents did, with the majority supporting a fee. Throughout this entire period, Go Green was proactive at meetings, raising awareness, educating, and encouraging messages to the trustees. In late 2022, the village staff drafted a new ordinance based on the recommendations from the Sustainability Commission. The trustees approved it in January 23 for implementation a year later, with the key points that you see here. Throughout 2023, there was a concerted pre-implementation effort that Go Green Northbrook contributed to. That was 12 months of education and information sharing using social media for the public and working directly with the retailers involved for the village. 38 retail stores met the criteria of the ordinance at the time, which is stores exceeding 3,000 square feet. So how is it going? After a year, many people have become accustomed to bringing their own bags for grocery shopping. But from observation, you're less likely to see customers bring their own bags if they're buying other goods like clothing. Data was collected monthly from store reports during 2024. 38 stores distributed 3.2 million bags, which seems really high, although quarterly results show that the final quarter was the lowest of the year, which is really good because it was a holiday period. We don't have base data for comparison, but we will know for sure that we used more bags in the past, perhaps even 4 or 5 million bags a year distributed by those same stores before the fee was introduced. Kate Carney is the new sustainability coordinator at the village. We say new, nearly a year, and is sending a follow-up survey this month to the participating retailers to understand their experience. So lessons learned. It's been quite a journey. The timeline is long, probably 3 to 5 years before implementation. You need to have staying power, and it's critical for village leadership. So that is a good place to start. Messaging and store signage is important. A bag fee is less emotive than a bag tax. And sadly, as I mentioned before, we don't have base data. So it's not like you can say how many bags you're using right now and have a goal to reduce it by X%. Thank you for listening. I wish you luck in implementing this in your local community. The more villages that adopt this type of ordinance, the easier it'll be for all of us. And it will be easy for the customers too, because they know what to expect. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So Northbrook made it happen. A lot of us haven't even tried yet, but with patience and persistence and belief that you can make a difference, Northbrook made it happen. Now we're going to hear from Joel Freeman because Evanston has also made it happen. So with that, Joel, I'm going to spotlight you and give you the mic. Joel Freeman, Climate Action Evanston.
Thank you, Beth. Well, as Bernadette mentioned, this can be a long process, and Evanston's probably had about a 10-year process. There was a first step taken in 2014 where the Evanston City Council approved a shopping bag ordinance which prohibited Evanston stores larger than 10,000 square feet from distributing point of sale disposable plastic shopping bags. Unfortunately, they were pretty clever and were able to circumvent that somewhat. So instead of the kind of the thin film plastic bags, they provided the thick film plastic bags, which were kind of claimed to be reusable. I think what was determined is that very few people actually reuse those. So the intent of the ordinance was not being really effective. So there was a second go at that. And so in 2020, the Environment Board of Evanston discussed revising the shopping bag ordinance and eventually came up with a draft, once again, to propose to City Council. And so from 2020 through into 2023, some of the applicability, the incentives, the fees associated with it kind of got wrangled. And finally, in May of 2023, the Evanston City Council adopted an ordinance amending the city code and creating a single-use bag tax. And what this ordinance then did was to, in the ban portion, it banned the distribution of all single-use point of sale plastic bags community-wide. This includes the large and small retailers. All plastic pre-checkout bags, which we probably all remember, we used to put our produce in there, our wet lettuce and things like that were plastic. So there's a ban on all of those. And there is an allowance for compostable bags for that purpose now under this ordinance. Then finally, all single-use point of sale paper bags must be composed of at least 40% post-consumer recycled content. So those are the elements of the ban. There was also a provision made to guide businesses. So there's a website available, resources for businesses to help them understand that. Then there was a small tax. And as Bernadette said, fee sounds better than a tax. In Evanston, it got termed a tax anyway. So all non-restaurant chain retail establishments exceeding 10,000 feet are required to charge consumers 10 cents for each single-use point of sale bag provided. That also includes paper bags. And each qualifying non-restaurant retailer is able to retain half of that tax. And at 10 cents, that would be 5 cents would go to the retailer. And I believe the intent there was to compensate the retailer for any additional costs in order to make those provisions. The other half would go directly to the city. I didn't get a chance to check, but I think that revenue stream for the city goes into a sustainability fund. I do not think it goes into the general fund. Then each, for the tax purposes, prior to the 20th of each month, each qualifying retail establishment must remit the full amount of the fee collected for all single-use point-of-sale bags provided to consumers during the previous month. So there's a consistent schedule of how that gets organized. There are a few exceptions, and as I watched it,
Joel,
yeah,
we're gonna need you to wrap up, okay?
just about there. Thank you. So the exceptions that were negotiated: bags provided by pharmacists that contains a prescription drug, newspaper bags, bags provided by restaurants for prepared carryout or leftover food or drinks, and bags that are used to carry items purchased to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, the Illinois Link Card, and similar government food assistance programs. Those are the exceptions. Like I said, this is through its full arc has been probably a 10-year process.
All right, Joel, thank you so much for sharing. It's really important for us all to recognize that the only two communities that I know of that have put these in place are ones that have hired full-time sustainability coordinators. And I think in many cases that is a huge difference. So thank you for sharing your progress with us, both Northbrook and Evanston. With that, we are going to move quickly to Liz Kunkle. She's going to give us a state legislative update. So Liz, thank you, Joel.
Hey, buddy, you bet.
We're running a few minutes late, so Liz is going to watch the clock
know.
carefully.
I am. Okay. I
There you
can't see
are.
a thing. So,
Okay, here we
this
go.
is the only,
Couldn't find you at first.
sorry, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can't see anything since I'm sharing my screen. So, hi, I'm Liz Kunkle. I'm the head of Go Green Winnetka.
Wait,
I'm also the
Liz,
You're not sharing your
can't
screen.
see your screen.
oh, well, I just said that. Sorry. I said share screen. There we go. Sorry. Share.
We got
There
it.
we go. Sorry. Missed that slide. Okay,
Got it.
got it now?
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Hi. Sorry. I'm Liz Kunkle, head of Go Green Winnetka, the co-chair of the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition Policy Committee. And actually in my newest role, I'm also the new state customer success manager for Recycle Coach. And my new colleague, Webb, is going to speak literally right after me and share a little bit more about Recycle Coach. Many of you know I live and breathe composting and recycling, so super excited to marry those. This very high level presentation with this one slide in front of us is the probably most impactful, highest level legislation that's been introduced in the state of Illinois that may impact these issues, building on everything that's been mentioned already, trying to stop things at the source, stop the production, recognize the ubiquitousness of plastics, the health hazards they cause, the difficulties with managing them after millennia. These bills are all designed at stopping them at the source, again, at the state level. So I'll just mention them really quickly. House Bill 1370 is, sorry, just want to chat. It's a really cool bill that would require all washing machines in the state of Illinois to have a microfiber filter installed before they're sold. It's just like the filters that already exist in all of our dryers. It's kind of a no-brainer. Why hasn't it been done already? That bill is potentially going to be called in committee, and that means there's an opportunity to submit witness slips in support of it this week or next. So just keep an eye out from all of your local groups. If you're a member, or your group's a member of the Illinois Environmental Council, they track these bills and send kind of real-time reminders when the bills are going up for committee, and those opportunities exist in real time to submit witness slips to show your support or opposition. But these would all be hopefully examples of bills that folks would support. So that bill also was an iteration of one that had been introduced previously. The next one, House Bill 1600, called Skip the Stuff or On Request Only, another way to get at single-use plastics by not having them be the default option. Literally just having restaurants and retailers ask customers if they want those plastic utensils, single-use items, again, whatever they are, ask if they want them rather than assume and offer them, whether through delivery or on premises. That's a new bill, very new bill for this year, and backed and promoted by the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. And some members on this call, Go Green, are affiliated with both Go Green groups and the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. So, and then the next bill listed on the left side, House Bill 2516, is a companion bill to Senate Bill 117, listed at the top of the right. PFAS product bans. There are a couple different iterations of PFAS product bans. Again, another one was dropped in the chat. These would basically ban PFAS across a range of products that are most in contact with human skin, cosmetics, food-related things, children-related items. So again, those highest impact products, but there are other iterations of PFAS bans introduced this year. The last bill I mentioned on the House side is House Bill 3029. It's one that would reduce all single-use utensils. And I know that this is one that is a priority, but Illinois Environmental Council is opting to focus its muscle behind the Skip the Stuff bill rather than the more widespread single-use foodware bill. And then shifting over to the right side of the screen, again, I mentioned the PFAS product bill. That's a companion bill to the House bill. That means they're basically mirror images of each other. They're just moving through parallel in each respective House. Then we also have Senate Bill 1531, which would ban foam foodware. That's that and the plastic bag ban bill below it, Senate Bill 1872. Both of those were bills that were introduced in the previous session and building on prior efforts to reduce both the foam foodware and the plastic bags throughout the state. So those are building on literally bills that were introduced in the last session. House Bill 2376 was the foam foodware bill. There were pairs of plastic bag ban bills. And again, I know there's another iteration of a plastic bag ban bill. So there's other versions of these that are floating around, but these are, again, potentially the highest level, the ones that have the greatest chance of passing and some of the highest impact. So these are just, again, there's lots others out there. Obviously, I could keep talking, but these are the biggest ones and the best ones to keep an eye out for. Our session in Illinois ends at the end of May. So this month, this month throughout the rest of March and into April is the time to be paying attention to these bills and help moving them through committee and contact your legislator to know you support them when they get to the floor for a House vote later in the session, hopefully. Thank you.
Awesome. Liz, that was great. Thank you very much. If your group is not a member or following the Illinois Environmental Council, I would really encourage you to do that. That's how you hear about these bills. And these bills don't pass unless our elected officials think that their constituents want them to pass. So make sure that you follow that legislation. Now, Lauren Webb with Recycle Coach. This is a new program. Lauren's got 5 minutes, and I appreciate the fact she is right here sharing her screen. And Lauren, you now have the mic. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Lauren. I'm from Recycle Coach. I'm actually based out of Toronto, Canada, so I'm really excited to be joining the call today. Recycle Coach actually had a partnership start with the state of Illinois through the EPA last May, June. And since then, we have been trying to launch our technology throughout the state and continue to do so. And what we're hoping to do is really use our tech to help decrease contamination, change behaviors, and really provide residents with correct information based on their communities of how to dispose of items correctly and curbside collection information. So just really quickly, what is Recycle Coach? So we were pioneered using traditional wall calendars for recycling education back in 2001. And as of most recently, we reached 1,600 plus municipalities throughout North America and in Australia and New Zealand. And over the years, we went from doing those traditional wall calendars to, okay, tech is the new thing. How can we put this information in the palm of your hand? And so we've created a mobile and web widget that municipalities can present to their residents and offer up information about their curbside program and about disposing of items properly. So what you'll see on your screen here is a few screenshots of our current solution. So like I said, we're a mobile app first. Municipalities will plug in their curbside collection information. Residents will get notifications and reminders of when to put out their garbage or recycling, yard waste, you name it, it can go on our app. They also have the ability to take a picture with their phone of an item and see how to dispose of that properly or type it in our search bar. We have all sorts of different education tools and technology where residents are able to go into our app or on the web widget on municipality's website and check out our discovery zone, play a bunch of quizzes, answer questions, watch videos, and really get customized content about the recycling education within their specific community. So we provide hyper-local information for residents because what might be legislative in Illinois might not be in another area. And so we want to make sure people are getting the right info and not contaminating, their waste streams. So what I'm going to do is drop into the chat really quickly. The city of Chicago has put the Recycle Coach web widget up onto their website. And so you can go to this web widget and check it out. Really exciting here for the city of Chicago. Also, Swalco has put the Recycle Coach web widget up on their site. And you're welcome to take a quick look at that and hit
Lauren,
the discovery zone and
Lauren,
check out what goes where.
Lauren, it's a blank screen. We're not seeing anything for those web widgets.
She dropped them in the chat,
Put 'em in the
folks.
chat. They're in the
Okay.
chat. Okay, Lauren, are you finished with your presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're going to remove your spotlight. Okay, so I can see there have been lots of discussions in the chat and people answering each other's questions, which is great. If you have some general questions, not real specific, but some general questions that would help people in all these different communities, could you put them in the chat? Kim Stone will take a look and speak up. I want to mention we do have people from communities like Joliet and Rockford and Galena, and we are getting further and further afield. If you have not yet started a group in your community, it only takes one person. All you got to say is that you exist and you do. So if you are new to the group, I hope you were able to learn some interesting information. Kim, do we have some questions that would benefit most of our audience?
I see a whole conversation about bags, and I'll just summarize really quickly. The best thing to do is a reusable bag. And while some people may think that those break down or wear out over time, I have had my bags for decades. I've been using them for probably over 30 years now, and sometimes they rip a little bit and I will just sew them back together. The paper bags are recyclable. If they're soiled with food, they can go into the compost. It's always better to recycle them first. And the plastic bags, let's try not to use them, I think, based on what we've heard. Someone's asking if communities here have banned artificial turf. I don't know of any. If anybody has, maybe pop that in the chat. And then Beth, I think we can go on to community reports.
Okay, just want to mention though that farmers markets are a place where there's a tremendous number of plastic bags that are used. Highland Park started a bag swap. Go Green Wilmette copied their model where we collect everybody's excess tote bags and we hand them out, wash them and hand them out for free, which is great, except we still have those single individual use bags from each farmer. It's very hard to figure out what to do with bunch of green beans or cherry tomatoes. So if you have any solutions, let us know because we all like to consider. I know Evanston banned them and then had to unban them. They had to walk back because the farmers market could not figure out how to deal with that. So if with that, I want to just thank all of our speakers. We've just gotten a ton of information. I know that you all were rushed and could have used more time, but thank you. We all got enough to know that the problem is really difficult, that it's going to take all of us working together in our communities and our state and our nation and our world to solve it. But thanks, all of you are at least aware and can spread the word about it. Again, this is getting recorded. It will be on the YouTube channel for Go Green Illinois. At this point, what we do is some community sharing. So if your group has an announcement that you want to make, something to cheer about, something you need advice upon, put your name, put your little hand up. That actually would be easiest. Go down to the bottom under reactions, right? And raise your hand. That's the easiest way to find you. Okay, Lori Brightkoff, everyone's going to have like a minute or two at the most. So Lori, go ahead. You're first.
Okay. I won't need a whole minute. I think the most exciting thing that the Riverwoods Preservation Council has done is set up a sustainability and climate action task force. The village liked it so much that it almost immediately made it into a village committee. We've been meeting now for a year, and we're just about to present our sustainability and climate action plan to the board for approval. Since we have 3 trustees out of 6 on our task force, we assume that approval will be forthcoming. And I guess my big ask is whether any communities out there are interested in sharing a sustainability coordinator. We are a very small community and very tight on funds, so we would be very interested in sharing a sustainability coordinator with another community. We're also seeking grants. The only other things I want to mention is that we're having an Earth Day birthday on April 26th from 1 to 4. It's going to be a zero waste event. We're going to have a sustainability services and goods market, which should be really fun. We're going to roll out our sustainability plan at that Earth Day birthday. We'll have mushroom propagation programs, wildlife rehabilitators, composting, decarbonization, energy efficiency information. We'll be giving away bare root trees. And in addition, we will have a native plant sale on May the 17th. So that's it.
Awesome. Great. I would like to add that if your community is considering a sustainability coordinator, think about starting with a smart part-time position. There are some very talented people that might jump at a part-time position. So sharing one is great, or making it part-time. See how that works. Okay, Mary Monday, please. She is from Glenview.
Hi, everybody. We have good news in Glenview. We have a grant to do a compost drop-off system, a pilot this summer. And so we are working, we're going to be using collective resource to do this. And we are looking for tips and information from other communities on how they have overcome the ick factor in households that have never done this before. What they've used for containers, perhaps, to give away. Skokie has a wonderful program going on, but they had municipal support. We are doing this as Greener Glenview. We do have a grant, but it will only cover the cost of the program. So we're going to have a program to announce it. So if you have gone through this, or if you have suggestions for excellent speakers, please let us know. And then on, we've heard all of this gloom and doom today. Very, very serious information. On April 7th at the Glenview Public Library, we're having a do-it-yourself native garden service called North Branch Natives. Come and present about how you can have them help you or design your native garden so that it will have curb appeal. So that's April 7th. I will put it in the Go Green Illinois calendar. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. We're going to call on Jacquelyn Casazza next. Thank you very much. She's going to has a very important slide about Lobby Day. You're on, Jacquelyn.
Okay, so I'm gonna just share this about Lobby Day. So Lobby Day is Thursday. You guys heard all this information today about plastic and how we have to take action. So next Thursday, March 20th, we are doing Lobby Day in Springfield. I'm trying to do, here we go, slideshow. We are going to Springfield, and this is with the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. This group represents a number of nonprofit, for-profit businesses, community groups, and faith-based organizations, and we're all advocating for an Illinois free of single-use plastic waste. I went to Lobby Day 2 years ago, and it is just so incredibly empowering to be in Springfield, be talking with our elected officials, and talking with them about these issues, because they're the ones, as I say, like, we need your help. Like, we're doing everything we can at home to reduce our plastic. We really need your help to implement these larger scale policy and legislative changes across the state. You will meet a number of other passionate people from all around the state, and you don't need any previous experience. All you need to bring is yourself. We'll have materials. There'll be team leaders there to walk you through. So just bring yourself. You can scan the QR code up here to register. I'm going So if you're near Glen Ellyn and you need a ride, we will actually have some transport. We have a few spots left. I know SEMA is also going. So you can email me or contact me, or SEMA for more information, or just register at the QR code. So that's on lobby day. And then just real quick, Go Green Glen Ellyn had our 7th sports swap on Sunday, where we have community members bring gently used sports equipment, and people can come in and get it for a reduced price, or swap things that they've brought in. And we raised over $1,500, and the average price of most items is, around $5. So that's a lot of stuff that got swapped. If you are considering doing this in your community, families love it. It's a really great way to get people engaged. Please reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you with it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacquelyn. Next, we've got Mary. You can put your hand down because I think you're done. Joel Freeman from Evanston, please.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. Last night, Evanston City Council passed what is entitled the Healthy Buildings Ordinance. And this puts building performance standards on the largest buildings in Evanston. It's an amendment to the benchmarking ordinance, which was passed in 2016. The benchmarking ordinance was energy and water. So the largest buildings need to report their annual use. So this modification is designed to have a rulemaking process in which targets for energy efficiency, elimination of on-site fossil fuel burning, and electrification through renewable sources in various ways. So that rulemaking process is what's going to end up transacting in the next year or so, in order to set up targets for different types of buildings, and with those main goals to be reached by 2050. So this is a 25-year target. There was a lot of opposition. Mostly it was fear about the monsters under the bed. A lot of people, I think, were finally calmed down a bit. And so City Council passed it 7-1 last night. So we're excited about that finally happening.
Awesome. That's great news. Thank you. Wendy Greenhouse is next. And then Seema, you're on deck.
Sorry about that. Yeah, Wendy Greenhouse from Oak Park Climate Action Network. On Sunday, we had the first of our two first open houses, sustainable open houses. We're calling clean energy open houses. And this was an opportunity for people to walk into 3 houses and talk to homeowners about all their sustainability upgrades, everything from geothermal and solar to heat pumps to electrifying all their other appliances, charging EVs in their homes, and all of this, so people can learn from the experience of fellow homeowners in Oak Park. We also had some contractors on hand who could answer questions about installation, and a lot of other information. Our second date is coming up on April 6th, and there's still spots for registering if you're interested. And I did put into the chat the URL for going on and registering for the open houses. April 6th, it's a Sunday from 2 to 4. It's free, but registration is required. And we'd love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seema from Vernon Hills next.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the advocacy work that we've been doing within our group. So one of the first things I wanted to highlight, especially with the plastics discussion today, which is definitely a lot of doom and gloom sometimes, is that in Lake County's solid waste management plan, there was an update to include chemical recycling as a sustainable solution to the plastics waste issue. And that was one of the things that our group had an objection with, and we presented at the Lake County board meeting a couple of times and spoke to some of the Lake County board members, and it was removed from Lake County solid waste management plan to include chemical recycling as a solution. So I wanted to highlight that because that was a big deal. There was a lot of discussion. I think it was a good 45-minute discussion at the board meeting over that issue. So I want to highlight that as, as a success, something that everybody can do. The other thing was we met with our new Vernon Hills Park District Executive Director. He's been in the job for 3 months. And I asked Beth and Kim, you know, is there anything like the Greenest Region Compact, which the municipalities sign on, that the park districts can do? And they pointed me to the Illinois Parks and Recreation's environmental scorecard. He was so delighted to see something like that. And he said that, you know, that's something he is definitely going to look at and get back to us in terms of using it. And one of the last things that I'll say, again, back to the plastics issue, is our group has for a long time looked at how we can systemically try to reduce plastics at a larger scale. So we have been very actively involved in legislation with the Coalition for Plastic Reduction. But one of the things that we've done is also try to be very actively involved in our schools and how we can reduce plastics at the schools. And we were able to successfully move our schools away from polystyrene foam trays, as well as stopping single-use plastic bottles being sold at schools and reducing the amount of plastic cutlery. And that was just a simple installation of a water dispensing station to get rid of the single-use plastic water bottles. And following that, our village did the same thing at their village hall as well. So it just, you know, I think that, you know, these are some of the things that has helped us feel a little bit positive about the plastics issues. So I just wanted to share a few things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seema. Okay, so now I'm going to do a report for Go Green Wilmette. So I'm going to spotlight myself here. And okay, so we try to keep these things to 90 minutes, but there's so much going on. For all of your groups, look for places to table and present. You're doing a lot of good work. More people need to know about it. This is the candidate season, election season. Reach out to your candidates. If they haven't found you, reach out and ask for a one-on-one meeting with them. You can get some talking points to discuss with them. It is the time, it's the best time to talk to these people before they get elected. So that's really impactful. Go Green Wilmette just had our first small person fundraiser since before COVID. We had 70 plus people, a super small silent auction fit on one table, and we made $3,800 in 2 hours from people who were willing to buy tickets on Eventbrite. It was actually really easy to do. People loved coming out and supporting our group, and we made almost $4,000. So if you are thinking funding is an issue, think about a small gathering. You can contact me if you want some guidance on that. We have a native plant sale on May 10th. I would encourage you to think about doing one of these in your own town, or come to ours, but in your own town is even better. We host bird walks and tree walks. We have a lakefront park that's the third best place for birding in all of Wilmette or all of Chicagoland. You can come join us Sundays, starting last week in April, first 3 weekends in May, 8 o'clock on Sunday. And many of our groups have sustainable yard tours. Now's the time to find those yards, put a committee together. That is a great way to really make people change what they're doing in yards. There also is an effort to get people to stop doing the big cleanups in their yards in the spring. Our yards right now are filled with insects that have overwintered, that are about to hatch, and they cannot hatch if our crews blow everything out and truck it all away from our yards. So we're trying to help people rethink pretty and delay that spring yard cleanup. So with that, no one else's hands are up. So Kim Stone, would you like to say a few words and close?
Let me do a quick Highland Park report.
Please do.
We had a celebration last week of our status as a certified habitat community, and it was great to have kind of a social event after all the work that our group had been doing to become that certified habitat community. We're planning an EV show for May 3rd. It's going to be in the Ravinia Festival West parking lot. For anybody who is in the market for a car and wants to come see a bunch in one place, or if you already have an electric car and you're interested in showing your car, please message me or sign up on the Drive Electric website. We are not accepting any Teslas for the show. That is new for this year. We also have a garden walk that we are planning for the summer, a sustainable yard tour, which will probably be in July, late July. And we're continuing the bag share program at the farmers market. The city of Highland Park purchased last night 2 hybrid vehicles for the police department fleet. We are increasing the number of hybrids in the police fleet. I was hoping we could begin buying electric cars. They are not available on the purchasing co-ops that municipalities use to get their cars. So I'm working with some folks who are interested in trying to get those added. If you or your community are interested in working with me on that, let me know. So with that, thank you all for being on the meeting today and being patient and staying on for so long, since it was a long Zoom. Our next meeting is May 13th on food waste and composting. That will be followed also by a tour of Patriot Acres, which is a compost facility. So keep watching your email for our email invitations for those events and sign up. And feel free to forward those as well to people you know in other communities that might want to start a Go Green group.
Okay, and I'm going to stay on. We are adjourned. I'm going to stay on for 15 minutes. If anyone else wants kind of one-on-one to talk to Kim and me, we're available. But we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Do you want to stop the recording?